Hello everyone! Today we'll be reading the biography of George Washington Carver by Luke Collins. George Washington Carver by Luke Collins. Here's a table of contents which tells us everything that we're going to be reading about today. It says Meet George, Young George, as an adult, later years, and then they have a glossary and then more resources. Meet George. George Washington Carver was a famous scientist and teacher. George invented more than 400 products made with peanuts and sweet potatoes. Young George. George was born in 1864 on a farm in Missouri. He was born a slave. George liked to study and grow plants. By 1875, he was free to leave the farm and go to school. This is a picture of George in about 1876. So he was born in 1864 and he leaves the farm in 1875. Down here we have a timeline. George finished high school in 1884. He went to college at Iowa. He studied art, plants, and farming. George finished college in 1896. So here are the two new events on the timeline. He finishes high school in 1884, and he finishes college in 1896. As an adult, George began to teach at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. This school was for African Americans. George taught students about plants and farming. So in 1996, he finishes college and begins teaching. In the late 1800s, farmers in the South began having problems growing cotton. The soil had lost too many nutrients. George worked with farmers to make the soil healthy again. So from 1896 to 1920, he's working with farmers. George taught farmers to grow other crops. Farmers started growing peanuts and sweet potatoes. These crops return nutrients to the soil. George, front left, working with farmers. So here's George. Later years. George invented many new uses for peanuts and sweet potatoes. He made ink and soap from peanuts. He made molasses, rubber, and glue from sweet potatoes. In 1921, he becomes famous for peanut research. George gave speeches throughout the United States. He told people about the uses for peanuts. He also spoke to Congress about helping farmers. In 1921, he becomes famous for his peanut research and he speaks to Congress. George died in 1943. He is famous for inventing new ways to use crops. People remember him for helping farmers. That is the end of our story today. Thank you for listening.